So, a very, very warm welcome to this episode of the HypnoGeeks podcast. And today I am absolutely thrilled to welcome back Roderick Aungier to the HypnoGeeks podcast. I hope I said his name right because I've asked him about 3 times before I hit record how I pronounce his surname. And he said it was Aungier like danger. So I probably didn't get it quite right, but I'm sure he'll tell me. We'll stick to Rod. Rod is a retired Gestalt psychotherapist, which means that he actually works harder now than he ever has done in his entire life. But he's altered and adapted and done some more learning, and he now describes himself more as an embodied relational therapist. So we'll get into what that means in a bit. He has got the most amazing, rich background in trauma work, in embodied awareness, in somatic development. And over the years, he's run private practices. And in the past, he's played real pivotal roles in establishing online and face-to-face training. He was very much a part of setting up the Complex Trauma Institute, where he offered lots of different training programs and webinars and active learning groups that were really focused on trauma and healing. His journey through into psychotherapy is very, very deeply rooted in his own life experiences. After years of working with people who have brain injuries and exploring the natural sciences and analytical chemistry, he found himself on a real personal journey of self-discovery and healing for himself as well, that ultimately led him to become a therapist and a Gestalt therapist, where he used somatic work as well. His personal story of overcoming his own traumatic experiences that include things like childhood violence, family challenges, has really put fuel in his rocket. It's fueled him. It's given him that passion, that drive to help others transform their pain through embodied awareness. He also has done lots of wonderful workshops. He calls them living body workshops. He's done these all over the world, and these workshops were specifically for therapists who were working with trauma, particularly clients who had perhaps had childhood trauma or their own trauma as well. And he was working with them in a very embodied way, giving them guidance and a framework to be able to work with embodied awareness in their practices. Rod's book, Surviving Complex PTSD, is on my bookshelf. Here it is, right next to me. You can see it here. It is absolutely a most amazing book. It's been incredibly influential for me. It's a real exploration of how people adapt, how they overcome, how they can survive, how they can rebuild their lives after they've endured ongoing chronic abuse and complex trauma. I deeply appreciate his positive, really hopeful approach. His work really emphasizes just how resilient we are as humans, even when our mental, physical, spiritual health has been profoundly affected by our life experiences. I recommend that book. Anyone's got an interest in complex PTSD, they want a bit of more of a deeper understanding of the practical realities of surviving abuse. Rod's perspective has certainly shaped the way that I work in my private practice. But today things have developed, and he's doing a lot more work around the area of experiencing trauma, particularly in childhood. And he's here to share about his latest project that he's working on. It really is a part of his dream. He really wants to launch a school, a training centre that will guide people, therapists, through a variety of training programs that will teach them how to use embodied awareness. He's also currently writing a book. He calls it A Little Manual of Bodied Awareness, a book that is a work in progress at the moment. I'm going to be getting my hands on that as soon as it's out. And it's centered on helping people to really understand embodied awareness and use it as well. He aims to publish his book and get this powerful work out there. He's got not only a great insight into this work, he's got really lived experience of how powerful and healing it is, and he wants to bring it to the man in the street. This work that he does, it really emphasizes the profound connection between our lived bodies, the experiences that we've lived through, the impact that has on our bodies, our healing processes, and he has a wonderful, powerful approach for people who are seeking deep embodied change. I'm really excited to dive into his insights today and learn so much more about embodiment, because it all sounds quite technical and it all sounds like big lots of exciting terminology, and I want to really get an understanding of this, because I'm excited about how I can facilitate lasting transformation in my work as well. So welcome back to the HypnoGeeks podcast, Rod.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, yeah.
Good to have you
Thank you
back.
very much. Yeah, yeah. I have rarely found someone who can reflect back to me uh, almost precisely what I mean. Most people, because they hear the words embodied and Gestalt and psychological trauma, etc., they think, "No, what the hell is this? Is it this? Is it that? Is it?" Yeah, you kind of nailed it. I like that, and uh, my desire is to simplify.
Yeah.
I don't want to be sitting here and saying to you all these kind of buzz complicated words. I want to be able to say, you as a human being can understand a lot more about yourself, your body, your body mind connection,
Mm,
how you have adapted over all the years you've been in the world
yeah.
to be who you are. And if you have a question about it today,
Mm,
and you might say to yourself, well, I never really put myself out there. I don't think I can label this at you. This is probably somebody else. Yeah, I never really put myself out there. I wonder why.
mm,
And that would be the kind of question that I would engage with someone in an embodied way about. I'd say, okay, let's sit down, think about it, sense it. There's a lot of feeling goes on between two people. Yeah, a lot of sensing, a lot of energetic exchange. And some of the complicated stuff is that you have uh, kinetic, by which I mean movement, um, memory in your body about things you did many, many years ago.
yeah.
So, I
We
mean, some
tend to
people call it,
bamboozle people, don't we, with these long, exciting words that have a variety of different meanings. And you're talking about kinetic and movement and memory and storing that memory in the body. But give me a little bit of a deeper understanding about what embodied awareness is, because I was having a Google and there are lots and lots of different explanations, all which use lots of exciting terminology, which kind of bamboozled my brain a little bit. And I had an understanding from my kind of hypnotherapeutic background, a little bit about it was. But how would you define that? And I think you were going to just do that there, but how would you define that? And how would you define embodied awareness in everyday terms, in an everyday kind of language that somebody like me can understand better?
yeah, okay. So start very simply. Start with a baby, shall we?
Yeah.
So baby's just been born. Right now, if baby's mother is like yourself, very loving, caring, giving, then there's there's a positive energy between baby and mother. Yeah. So
Hmm.
mother will look at baby and say, "God, you're gorgeous," and baby will look back and say, "Oh, I really like that." Yeah. But imagine that, say, mother has had problems. Maybe she's had trauma in her childhood.
Mm.
She's had issues. Yeah. She's living with a not very nice partner. They didn't want the baby. It's a mistake. Yeah.
Hmm.
So when baby comes out, yeah, uh, mother looks down at baby and kind of maybe thinks, let's hope this works out,
Yeah.
because you're going to be expensive, and
Fear,
uh,
trepidation,
yeah,
worry, anxiety,
yeah. So imagine,
resentment, maybe as well.
yeah. So imagine, baby is looking at you, at mother,
Yeah.
eye to eye, and they're not getting the same vibe that they got with the other mother. It's much more of a, oh, I'm barely born and already you're like condemning me, and you're making me feel like I'm a burden,
Yeah.
So how does baby feel in their body at that moment in time? Yeah, and they haven't even learned language, so they can't say, "Well, what did I do wrong?" kind of thing. Yeah.
Mm. So
So there's
disconnection, perhaps. I mean, abandonment is a big word, but
yeah, well,
certainly
there's a
not held in the way that babies probably need to be held with love.
yeah, which is where the kinetic thing comes in because the baby
Okay.
is being moved. Yeah. So the baby's trying to move in the world,
Yeah.
and the more help they get to move in the world, the better. But if they don't get help, if they're hindered, if the environment is not helpful, if the primary caregivers, the mother and the father, are not helpful, then these are the challenges for the baby to overcome from day one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And what the body does is it adapts. It says, okay, I can't express myself completely in front of these caregivers because it doesn't look like they want to hear what I've got to say, kind of thing. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I will close myself off a little bit. Yeah. So baby's closed himself off a little bit. Now, project that into the future. So
Mm.
as an adult, the adult still has that very early memory
Yeah.
of closing themselves off when with other people. Yeah. So how are they going to thrive in the world when they've got a sense of themselves as not very good? Yeah.
Yeah, not wanted, not loved,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
needed, not good enough. And I
Yeah.
think probably, that could also create lots of distrust around people. And if you're not trusting others, then maybe your behavior is not that trusting as well. I
Yeah.
could imagine that could create a like a domino effect of all sorts of challenges just from that point
Yeah. Well,
on.
it has a field effect
A
because
field effect.
if you don't push yourself out there,
Mm,
then the world can't receive you in a way that shows all of you. So the world might even judge you and say, this person not. I wouldn't want to trust this person terribly because they're not showing me all that they've got. It's not their fault. They didn't choose to have those parents that they had that were difficult. Yeah,
mm,
they just reacted and adapted to the situation. But as a result of reacting and adapting, they've come out at the adult stage as kind of almost less of an adult than they could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe, they get problems, they get depressed, or they take to drink or whatever to cope. And at some stage, a crisis comes along, and maybe they go into therapy. Now, if they come to an embodied therapist, then the embodied therapist can work at that level, the embodied level, because the therapist might see that the adult, because of the childhood experience, is not giving an awful lot to them in an embodied way. And the way the embodied therapist works is that they know their own body very well. They know what their own resonance is like. So when it's resonating with a client, they can sense if there's a difference, or if there's something going on that they become interested in. So they can then say to the client, there's I'm wondering what's going on between you and me, and I wonder what part I might play in that. Because there will be a recognition, a bodily recognition.
Yes.
A kinetic bodily recognition that you could call the body memory, from years ago, that is being recognized by me in the moment, and is being brought to the two of us as a thing, and maybe you start talking about, well, my mother wasn't terribly helpful, or she love was very conditional. She'd say, okay, do the washing up and I'll give you a sweetie or something, or I'll go out and work in the fields and you get a hug when you come back, that kind of thing. So conditional love, so you have to work hard for it. And it's not really love anyway,
Go get
because
that
love is
certificate at school. And then I'll tell you how wonderful you are.
Because love is just freely given to both sides, isn't it? There is no condition. So we can do some work with that.
Okay, so let me just go back a bit. So the environment that we live in, that our bodies are in, that our minds are in, that we occupy, creates challenges for us, whether that be because of a lack of love or a lack of connection, or because we weren't wanted, or because that we heard something or we experienced something that created almost like a belief within us, or an energy around us, or a sense or a feeling of not being safe or not being loved, or our needs were not met, basically. So we adapt so that we can meet our own needs. We go quiet, we get louder, we do the hey, look at me, I'm really entertaining, or we go inward, or we people please, or we get angry, but we react or respond so that we can get our needs met. We adapt. That creates almost like this field effect that then kind of almost predicts or creates who we're going to become in adulthood. And it's very much influenced by that kinetic experience, the kinetic memory. Is that right? The experience, is that what you mean by kinetic?
I think the kinetic will probably trip people up. So probably easier to say body memory,
The body memory.
even though it's kind of not really.
Yeah.
I'm not going to answer that phone, by the way.
I can't hear it, so it's all right.
All right, good, because it's not mine. But
But it can make people less than they could have been. It can have an impact on, oh, there is something there. It can have an impact on who they feel they are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have it. You have it. Yeah. It's about when you're a baby, you've got all the potential,
Mm.
but you haven't got the strength to overcome a lot of the challenges.
No, you've
Yeah,
got to kind of please your carers, haven't you? Because they're the ones that are keeping you alive. They're the ones that are keeping you fed. They're the ones that are providing everything that you need. So I guess you have to adapt if you want to
yeah,
survive. And
yes.
adaptation might look like being quiet and shy, or adaptation might look like being loud, or adaptation might be people pleasing, or adaptation might be working in the fields, or you know, cleaning the house, or it can look like all sorts of things. Adaptation, can't it? It's
Yeah,
we're very skilled at overcoming challenges, I think, but I think those challenges can often cause injury and pain, and certainly alter who we are experiencing as ourselves as uh, in
I,
life and what we're choosing.
yeah. I'll just say one thing. It's when you adapt, uh, you're adapting because of all the survival mechanisms you have in your body. But what happens is the body adjusts to a best fit scenario.
Hmm, hmm,
Now,
hmm.
probably have to explain that. So, in in the perfect scenario where you're loved and cared for and encouraged, yeah, then your energy is powerful. Yeah, it's whoa.
Yeah.
It's about as good as you get. But if you're adapting and you're having to shut yourself down, close yourself off, yeah, that's a best fit. That means that's the best we can do to get our needs met,
Hmm.
to survive, to go forward. If we didn't do that,
But it's an
then
inauthentic
maybe,
state.
yeah, yeah,
It's an inauthentic
the,
way of being.
yeah,
I've heard inauthenticity in that way being described as an injury. And sometimes we bounce back and we recover from those injuries. Like, if you've cut yourself, your skin heals, but sometimes if it's a deep cut, you end up with a scar. And I think the scar tissue is quite inflexible, and I think perhaps that can cause inflexibility in life and cause us to limit ourselves in lots of ways, and certainly be less than we could be. And I
yeah. I
guess,
mean
does the word
that is the key.
does the word
Oh.
embodied mean then to be more you?
Um,
Is
well,
it about
it
being more of you?
in an ideal world, yes, you get to be more embodied because if you've adapted an awful lot, you become less embodied. You become less of yourself.
Yeah.
Your your posture is different. Your gestures are different.
Yes.
Your shoulders droop. Your head goes down. You don't kind of reach out lovingly like that to people. You're kind of a bit more cautious.
Guarded,
So
protected.
yeah,
Hmm.
those are all kind of
Quite painful states to live in,
um,
actually.
yeah, but
Unpleasant to live like
yeah,
that.
yeah, but you had no choice. You
Hmm.
had to survive to get your needs met, as you said, and that's what you do. The problem with the and it's about the biochemical stuff inside you as well. You know the fight flight mechanism, obviously, yeah.
Yes.
So the trouble with fight flight is it's such an ancient survival system.
Yes.
It can't be reversed, can it? If you come across the saber-toothed tiger when as a caveman, you know.
Very sensible thing
Uh,
to not reverse that. You
yeah,
want to remember to run away from that.
yeah, yeah, but that's the point because the just to go a little bit technical, the hippocampus is your emotional memories, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah. So if you get attacked by the tiger, that goes into your hippocampus, your emotional memory. So which gives you the reaction, the fight or flight,
Hmm.
fight the animal or run away from it.
Hmm.
But from that moment on, anything in life that reminds you of saber-toothed tiger is going to trigger those
The fight or
hormonal.
flight response.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's there, it's still right there, it's unprocessed, it's still you're still in it, even
yeah,
though you're not there
yeah,
anymore. It's still very present
yeah,
in the hippocampus, isn't it?
yeah. Yeah.
So when
So
you work as an embodied therapist and you're working at the embodied level, are you working to help the hippocampus kind of process those experiences so that they can become something that's learned, something that is more adapted, but is now not having the same kind of big fight or flight kind of response?
yes and no again.
Okay.
It is my usual answer. Um, you're dealing with uh, the trigger, if you like. So the original trauma. If you can go back to the original trauma with your client, and I don't know, maybe it's a bully, yeah.
Yeah.
So clients talking about the bully. Well, the bully came up and and you know, I shrank, and I became, uh, all my muscles tensed up, and what have you. When we're talking about it, they're being triggered, yeah,
Yes, because they're
because
reliving
that's what you
it
do.
as they're talking
Yeah.
about it.
Now we in ethically, you can't really work that way
Yeah.
because they don't encourage you to re-trigger your client. Even though even reading about some stuff in a book can re-trigger a client.
Yes.
But what you
Same
can do
sound.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, but what you can do is some work along the lines of going back to the original trigger, and you probably do this in hypnotherapy, and you imagine yourself being, for example, bigger than the bully,
Hmm.
yeah, and so the bully comes up to bully you, and you just end up beating the bully, yeah,
Hmm.
and somehow that resets the system,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think it's because you're meeting the unmet needs and you're
yeah,
reframing the experience
absolutely,
in
yeah,
a way that has a more helpful and positive outcome.
yeah, yeah, and I know hypnotherapy does that, and in embodied, we do the same thing, just in a kind of different way. So,
Amazing. Amazing work.
ideally, maybe people should do embodied and hypnotherapy.
I love that
Really
idea.
nail it.
I love
Yeah,
that idea. That would really sort it out, wouldn't it? So
yeah,
working at the embodied level is about recognizing the journey of the person, I guess, and the experiences that they've had, which is such a unique way of working with people. It's really not a one solution fits all kind of way of working because everybody's experiences are so beautifully unique. But it's about really recognizing where that person has been and what is the pin in the trigger, if you like, the focal point of the experience that is causing them to be less than they
mm,
than they could be, that's causing them to have that life that is not as happy as they would like, or as embodied or as fulfilled as they would like.
yeah. And
And
it starts with you.
yeah,
awareness.
And it starts with awareness.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about embodied awareness and what
Um,
how do we start with embodied awareness?
well, you would don't forget we're working experientially, so
I'm
you're
hearing
not.
lots of working with concepts of transference and countertransference in the therapy room there, like feeling into. Oh, am I right there?
You can use, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you understand transference and countertransference, then you can get what's going on in the therapeutic space. Yeah.
Okay.
So transference is when uh, uh, I recognize something in you that has relevance to me. Yeah.
Yes.
And countertransference is when you don't want to admit to it, and so you say, "Oh no, it's not my fault; it's your fault." Yeah, and they say transference is like a room full of mirrors. Yeah, you've got to really unpick things carefully
Mm-hmm.
because there's projection as well. You know, where there's something about you that you don't want to admit to. Yeah, so you tell me that I'm doing that to you. Yeah,
Oh, yes.
that and that's you find that a lot in narcissism, but that's kind of uh, not really working that way. Uh, so to come back to the point about working experientially with in an embodied way, uh, we still do the talking about. So, uh, but we do it in and in a Gestalt way, it's about staying in the moment,
Yes.
and it's about using I statements. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just what's happening here between you and me right now. You know, what are you feeling? What are you sensing?
Mm-hmm.
What thoughts are coming up in you? You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, and if you want to share them, use I statements. Yeah, so that we're clear. Yeah, so I feel like you, Rod. You're a big hairy lad, and I don't really like you. Yeah. Now, if that's the truth,
Yeah.
then that's great. We can work with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you might not say that because you don't want to upset me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. In which case, we don't get anywhere. Yeah.
Very true.
But in the presence between us, there is an energetic exchange going on as well.
Yes.
And that's when the body memory or the kinetic stuff
Mm.
might surface. Yeah. So, for example, I might ask you about your mother. Oh, tell me about your mother, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
You might immediately look away. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
might go, ooh, that's interesting. Amanda, talking about her mother, looks away,
Mm-hmm.
cuts off contact with me. Yeah. So there's
So
something
there's a
about that.
disconnect there.
Yeah. There's a disconnect. There's an embodied disconnect. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in my gaze
Mm.
whilst talking about your mother.
So there's
That's
often
interesting. Yeah.
discomfort and disconnect.
Yeah.
Mm.
So we kind of pull on that thread. So I might say, "Oh, Amanda, we were just talking about your mother there, and I'm not sure. I felt a trifle, weird. Does that make any sense to you?" And you might say,
Well, yeah,
"Well, actually,
actually.
yeah." And
Okay.
and that's the awareness. That's the moment of awareness.
So
Uh,
awareness is about almost like really, it's a really mindful experience, isn't it? Of being very present with your client and being really observant of those little micro movements, those little tiny little reactions and responses that the client might not even be
Yeah.
aware of. Um,
Yeah, and you've hit a little piece of the puzzle. Micro movements mean slowing down
mm,
to be aware of them. And they're very important because they're so easy to miss
yes.
if, if you're both avoiding. So say you've got a therapist who tends to avoid and a client who tends to avoid, then you're both yakking away at each other and nothing is felt between you. You
Yeah.
see? That's why everything has to slow down, has to be uh, just in the moment
Hmm. Hmm.
between you and me. And then you have to own everything you say, and I have to own everything I say. So it has to be an honest communication.
I think that's incredible. I think just the slowing down, I think for somebody like me would force a little bit of a pause because I'm 1,000 miles an hour all the time, and I think we live in a world that's 1,000 miles an hour all the time. So that kind of slowing down and really kind of being in a present, mindful place of awareness, I think
Mm.
just that in itself is going to bring to the surface all sorts of
It,
things
it
that have been quite hidden.
yes, it will allow space for those things to come up, to be
Mm,
worked with if you want to. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I suppose a slight difficulty for you is that you are extremely good with communication. So, I know a lot of people these days, because the brains are so much bigger these days, uh, that people are communicating so much faster than they used to.
Yes.
Yeah. And that might be just natural, or it might be avoidance. You have to decide.
I think it's a little bit of both, isn't it? It's certainly the faster we go, the more we can avoid, the easier it is to avoid. And
Yeah.
do you think that's why embodied awareness is actually a really vital practice for people today because of that kind of approach?
Well, I'm obviously going to say that for me it is. Yeah. Because I have found that when I do slow a client down, and we might even go into silence. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I just say, in the silence, if you feel anything, you know, say it.
Mm,
Doesn't matter what it is. It could be the start of some awareness that might take
mm,
us somewhere.
yeah. So when I'm practicing compassionate inquiry, I call it, when I'm in a consultation space, and I notice a client has had a micro response,
Mm,
there's been a pause or a shift in the way that the tonality of their voice or a body language has changed, or there's been a close and an open with their body language. I tend to point it out and then ask them to sit with that,
mm,
and just observe that, just give that some
yeah,
space and observe it. And those words, give that some space and observe it, whether it's a thought or a feeling or a small response, and just notice what happens. And that tends to, in my experience, tends to bring up or bring about some clarity on a need that hasn't been met, or an emotional reaction, or a thought, a feeling, a sensation, words. And sometimes those words that in a dialogue are not the client's words, they come from someone else. And it's quite useful to
yeah,
pinpoint that sort of it is quite a mindful um or a mindful way of working. Do you think there's something that sort of distinguishes embodied awareness from mindfulness and meditative practices, because there's a lot of similarities there for me.
Yeah, I would say there's very little difference, except that for um, for the way I work in an embodied way, most of my tuning is into my own body, and I'm sensing me.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking to you, I might, I don't know, maybe my chest gets tight,
Hmm.
uh, and I have to then decide, what do I want to do with this? Uh, so my chest went tight because you said this, that, or the other. Yeah. Now, it might not be helpful for me to instantly say, hey, my chest is tight. What's going on? Yeah. Because you may not have any sense of what is going on.
Yes.
Uh,
We're quite disconnected from our bodies, aren't we? We very much live in our head and in a
uh,
very busy, rapid, high speed world. So we're
yeah,
not we're not tuned in to what's
yeah, that
happening.
yeah, that is an interesting point. Which just just to go back to the early development stuff in the
Mm.
children.
Yeah.
So you know that when you were born between the ages of 0 and 2, you haven't started vocalizing yet. Yeah. Now between those years, you're just like an animal. Your body is sensing your environment like an animal would.
You're just feeling everything.
Yeah, yeah. Your brain's not involved. Your brain's not saying what's going on. Your brain is just being your brain. It hasn't quite got there yet.
Hmm.
As soon as you introduce language and rational thought, you're in a completely different world where the answers are much more difficult because they're all related to uh, brain stuff. They're related to, you need your answers to be rational, you need it to be logical, but the world isn't logical.
No.
Yeah. If you want to find an answer, get back into your body and
Yes.
feel what your body is sensing, and then your body will give you the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like the words are not quite enough to really
No, they can
express or
never be enough.
understand.
But they're an artificial creation.
They're symbolic, aren't they,
Yeah,
of
they're created to
sensations.
they're created for you to be able to communicate with
Mm.
other people at a certain level,
Yeah.
not at a body level.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's an awful lot going on underneath words and underneath the world, and around that is, yeah, that's really sort of bubbling away, isn't it? That is
yeah,
probably where all the challenges are,
yeah,
at the roots.
yeah. But we've kind of lost that because as human beings we developed and we've done fantastically well. We developed
Amazing.
because our brain got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and we learned to think rationally and do all this stuff.
Hmm.
But at some level, we've forgotten that you know beneath the shoulders, we're just like quivering animals who are
So
constantly sensing what's going on.
quivering animals. I love
Yeah,
that. So
yeah,
the embodied awareness is a way of really deepening an understanding of ourselves. But I think it's deepening an understanding of the mind body connection, the way that we are in the world as well. I'm
yeah,
not quite sure if I'm putting that into the right words. I'm feeling it, but I'm not sure it's there.
yeah. No, I mean that's been the biggest sort of change in things over the last maybe 30 years,
Yeah.
where we've gone from certainly in therapy, where we used to think. Uh, I mean, that's saying it. We used to think rather than feel, uh,
Yeah.
and we used to think, well, here's the brain, here's the body. they're different. Yeah. But now we say body mind without a pause. Yeah.
Body mind.
Because, I mean, there's a memory within every cell of your stomach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's all that about? Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. And more and more, the neuroscience revolution is showing
Mm,
stuff that a lot of people used to think was right, but could never prove it. Like, Tai Chi, Qigong, that
yeah.
sort of thing, yoga, uh, and the idea of energy. There is now proof that every organ in your body is vibrating outwards. Yeah. At a very kind of gentle level.
Mm.
And it's mixing with the energy of everyone else around you. Uh, and likewise, yeah. And all the energy comes from the sun initially. So it's all out there in nature.
Mm.
Yeah. All of nature is vibrating as well, which is why we like to be in nature. And that's why people go to nature to heal. That's where the MDR came from, didn't it? From a walk in the woods. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yes. And the movement forward and the movement of the eyes. I
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is related to the fight flight mechanism
Mm-hmm.
because it interrupts the flow. Because, oh, there's a tree. Oh, there's a tree. Oh, there's a tree. So you don't stay in the
In the
scary flow.
moment, you move
Yeah.
forward from it and you get a
Yeah.
different perception. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And having said that,
yeah,
EMDR is enormous now.
it is, isn't it?
And yet when I was taught it, uh, he was taught by a man who had a pencil. And he
Yeah.
said, "This is the MDR."
Yeah. That's right.
Anyway,
I
sorry.
like IMT as well. I think IMT is very a nice way of using eye movement to
Okay.
integral eye
Yeah.
movement
Mm. In
therapy
in
to
embodied work,
techniques. Mm.
in embodied work, eyes have the most uh, power, and you'll
Yeah.
know that because you're recently married. And when you look into the eyes of your loved one, yeah, you will get something that is pretty damn powerful, won't you?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Melty, melty, gooey loveliness.
Yeah.
Like there's no
Yeah, precisely.
It's a
So,
really wonderful experience, isn't it?
yeah.
Having that eye contact. And it's interesting, you were talking about eye to eye as well in the within the baby. When you were talking about the baby at the beginning there, you were talking about that eye to eye connection.
Yeah, that is very important,
Mm,
immensely important in the first 2 years, because that's one of the first things that gets used in communication. Mother gazes at baby, and
yeah,
if mother gazes lovingly at baby, then baby goes, "Oh, I like this." Yeah.
yeah,
But if mother gazes at baby and thinks, "Bloody hell,"
disdain.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, so baby goes, "What did I do?" Yeah,
Yeah, interesting. The gazing eyes
yeah,
and the windows to the soul, really, aren't they? The eyes. So the
absolutely.
eyes, the connection that we have when we look on someone, we look at someone, connect with somebody, and the role of physical sensations, feelings. I've written feel and I've drawn a wiggly line around it on my notes about 3 times. The feel of a situation and how that helps us to better understand our emotions, our thoughts, our triggers, what's at the root of why we react and respond. And I guess that's a process that we need to go through. With a
Mm.
therapist, I would imagine that process is much faster, but within everyday life, I think that it's a
Yeah,
developmental process developing that embodied awareness and almost starting to really listen, tune in,
Yeah.
sense
Yeah.
our our physical reactions and responses,
Yeah.
as well as just what's going on inside of our mind in terms of the inner chatter or the emotional reaction or response
Yeah.
that we're having.
Yeah. That's why you just described the dream for the book.
I love
You
it.
know, I want to get that way of doing things to everybody because it's available. It's just people don't realize it's available, I suppose.
It seems almost like when you start to really simplify it in the way that you have, it starts to seem really accessible. Oh, so it's
Yeah,
about
it
really
it is.
tuning in. It's about
Yeah,
really listening to
yeah,
what's happening within me. How am I
yeah.
feeling about something? What do you think are some of the key practices or daily habits that we can get into, good habits that we can get into that could really help me, somebody, become more embodied, have more of this embodied awareness?
Yeah. In an ideal world, you would want to be with someone who was of a similar mindset, should we say?
Mm,
Yeah. You know, that's the perfection. But of course, the likelihood is, yeah, it's not easy. Um, Probably what's um, yeah, you've probably not heard of Eugene Gendlin and his focusing technique. No. Okay. He was a Gestalt psychotherapist in the 1950s, and he came up with what he called focusing, which is a way of working with the body, because he noticed that when his clients talked about their body symptoms, they improved more. There
yeah.
was an increase in whatever. So he developed this technique, um, and there are variations on this technique, and one of them is the helicopter ride through your body, right? And that
Okay.
involves just sitting in your favorite armchair, you know, with make sure you're nice and warm, make sure you're not going to be disturbed, and maybe 4 or 5 relaxing breaths of the like 4, 7, 8 variety,
Hmm.
you know, in through 4, out through 7. No,
In
in
for
for
all
4,
7.
hold for 7, out for 8.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then you have to gently close your eyes. Imagine above you a little helicopter with mini you inside it. Yeah.
Okay.
And that helicopter can go anywhere the hell it wants. Yeah. So you imagine yourself in your little helicopter and you come in and you crash through your skull and you start flying around your brain and you start having a look and this bit's very grey and this bit's dark over here. Come down, look into your eyes, yeah, and you basically take a trip through your whole body and come back up. And what you're looking for is something that you don't expect to find. Yeah. So, for example, if you come through, maybe you're coming down your throat. Yeah. So, helicopter's coming through, and well, there's a big gate there. What's all that about? Uh, but of course, you go through the gate and then you explore everywhere else. But at the end, when the helicopter's gone away again, You think, well, where did the gate come from?
Mm.
You start thinking about your throat and a gate. Why is the gate shut? Why isn't the gate open? Why doesn't the gate allow stuff out? And this is from a real client that I worked on. And we said, well, the gate's closed because it's safe. And so I was saying, well, do you trust me? And I said, well, yeah. Well, let's open the gate and see what happens. And so we opened the gate, and he said, fuck off. Yeah. And it was just, it was, he had to release that. Yeah. He'd been blocking
Something
that
deep
part of
down.
himself for
Mm.
however, and whoever it was he said fuck off to, um, he discovered later. But it was like he just swallowed and contained a bit of bullying from this person.
And then when
So
he went into his body in a helicopter, that metaphor, that visualization, his subconscious
yeah,
showed him a representation, the gate of what it was that was blocking him, and he took
yeah,
action, which is a bit
yeah,
like primal imaging or reverse metaphor. And
yeah.
he
Well, yeah.
opened the gate, and
Metaphor
that
is
released something.
yeah,
What a
yeah,
beautiful way to work. What an absolutely beautiful
yeah, yeah. I mean,
way.
metaphor is the word. You've got it. It's
Hmm.
metaphorically. He was pushing down his
Mm.
words.
Locking them behind a gate.
Yeah, yeah. So potentially you may come across something that you see in your body that's not what you expected to see. Maybe the color is different. Maybe the sense is different. Maybe it feels different. Maybe whatever. But once the helicopter's out of there, you then think, I wonder what that meant. What is the
Yeah,
meaning of that? Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And if you're interested in focusing, there's like a British school of focusing.
Oh, is there?
Uh, yeah, it's good stuff because there's a European
Yeah.
school as well.
I found
It's
there seems to be so many crossovers and blends of techniques that are all called slightly different things that all seem really
absolutely,
familiar when you kind of go, this is what it looks like. This is how it looks in a therapy room when you're using
yeah.
um embodied awareness. These are some of these are some of the metaphors. These are some of the visualizations. This is kind of how it looks and how it works. There are lots of real similarities there. So if you were going to start to apply this in your therapy room, how do we get to train? How do we get to learn more? How do we get to get the skills? When are you opening your school?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I am I am looking to train people in my way of doing it. It uh, it's allied to what they call somatic developmental psychotherapy in New York, which is where I trained. Now, that is a very expensive training.
Yes.
You may not necessarily want to spend all that money. Yeah.
No.
So, but how do you learn about embodiment? Uh, I know I am happy to do workshops, demonstrations, whatever. And because when I was doing workshops back in the day before COVID, uh, I was either a co-presenter or a presenter, but you needed two of you because you have to rely on you needed support basically. Uh, so I'm looking to train people to do similar, which I'm quite happy to offer for. for free, even if it can be arranged, uh, because I want to pass on my knowledge before I put my clogs,
I'm
which is
booking you in. The minute we're off this call, I'm booking you in.
all
We
right.
must get you to come and speak at our convention, and which will be in Harrogate. So hopefully
Okay,
not too
yeah,
far.
happy to do that. Yeah,
But I'd love to book you in for a workshop. I think it would be absolutely fantastic. It blends so beautifully with the work that we do with clinical hypnotherapy, but I think it kind of gives you such a deeper insight and will guide therapists to become more aware of what's going on for them as well as
mm,
what's really going on with their clients, those little micro responses, how we look on someone, how we connect with someone. And I think
mm,
just having an awareness that the person who's coming into this therapeutic space with you is full of those experiences that's making them who they are, and every micro reaction and response is potentially as a result of something that they've lived through and experienced, and really
resonates with you.
yeah, really
Mm,
holding space for the beauty of the uniqueness of
mm.
that person. It kind of nicely reflects the work of Milton Erickson as well when he speaks about the uniqueness of the client. So some really interesting crossovers there. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for talking about this on the podcast today. When I Googled it, there was so many confusing, um,
Yeah.
complex ways of describing what it is. I feel like we've really got to the root of it and nailed it. So thank you for your time today. It's been awesome.
Well, the trouble when I started learning this was I would go to workshops where people would be working with other people,
Mm,
and I would ask myself, how the hell did you do that? And I would ask them, and more or less they couldn't tell me,
yeah,
because you know it's it's still complicated. You have to keep simplifying, keep trying to get it into a shape that works for you, because if it doesn't resonate with you, you're not going to necessarily do it very well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah,
And
for years I was confused about how to do it.
I think when we're working with things that are difficult to describe with words,
Yeah,
and we're
precisely.
removing logic altogether really with this kind of work, it definitely gets more challenging.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You have to lose the bit of you that wants a common sense answer, because it might not be there.
Which is super easy for me because I've not got common sense at all.
Yeah, but not for everyone, of course.
Rod, it's been so nice having you back on the podcast. Thank you for coming and sharing your insights today.
It's
And
been great fun.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
be I'm gonna be booking you for a
Okay.
workshop with
Yeah,
me.
well, yeah, I'm
Right.
available.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
Well,
listening.
thank you.
Bye.
Okay.